The year was 2475, and humanity had finally earned its place among the stars. After the devastating Third Galactic War, the remnants of civilization had coalesced into the Galactic Alliance, a sprawling confederation of 12 distinct species, working together to rebuild what had been lost. For the first time in human history, we were no longer alone in the universe, and more importantly, we were no longer considered the greatest threat to galactic peace. Captain Mara Voss stood on the bridge of the Alliance vessel, Aegis Nova, her crisp blue uniform bearing the insignia of both Earth Command and the Galactic Alliance. As humanity's first liaison officer aboard a multi-species vessel, she carried the weight of representing her entire species on her shoulders. The responsibility was immense, but Mara had volunteered for this assignment, knowing that first impressions would shape humanity's future in the Alliance for generations to come. Starbase Orion grew larger in the viewport as the Aegis Nova approached for docking. The massive structure rotated slowly against the starfield, its multiple arms extending like the spokes of a wheel. Each arm housed different atmospheric conditions and gravitational settings to accommodate the various Alliance species. Today marked a historic occasion, the first joint diplomatic reception, where all 12 Alliance species would formally welcome humanity into their ranks. Captain Voss came the melodic voice of Ensign Lickel, one of the translucents who served as her assistant. The translucent beings were known for their crystalline appearance and their ability to perceive electromagnetic spectra far beyond human capability. The diplomatic chamber has been prepared according to standard neutral protocols. All species representatives are gathering on Deck 3. Mara nodded, smoothing down her uniform one final time. Thank you, Ensign. Are the environmental systems functioning properly? I want to ensure everyone is comfortable for today's proceedings. All systems are operating within normal parameters, Lickel replied, though there was a slight hesitation in their voice that only someone who had worked closely with translucents would notice. The atmospheric processors are maintaining optimal conditions for all species requirements. The diplomatic chamber aboard the Aegis Nova was a marvel of engineering designed to accommodate the diverse physiological needs of the Alliance species. The Quan breathed a methane-rich atmosphere, the Silvax required higher pressure, and the translucents needed specific mineral compositions in their air. Somehow, the Alliance engineers had created zones within the same space that allowed all species to coexist comfortably, separated by nearly invisible force fields that maintained distinct environmental conditions. As Mara entered the chamber, she was struck once again by the incredible diversity of the beings gathered there. Captain Silvat Kor, the Aegis Nova's commanding officer, stood at the center of the room, his reptilian features dignified and imposing. The Silvax were one of the oldest spacefaring races in the Alliance, and their military traditions ran deep. Despite his initial skepticism about bringing humans aboard Alliance vessels, Kor had proven to be fair and professional in his dealings with Mara. To Kor's left stood Dr. Elix Vorn, the Quan biochemist who had spent considerable time studying human physiology in preparation for this historic integration. The Quan were perhaps the most scientifically advanced species in the Alliance, their insatiable curiosity about the universe, matched only by their methodical approach to understanding it. Dr. Vorn's multiple appendages moved in constant subtle motions as he processed information from various scanning devices built into his body. Representatives from the other Alliance species filled the chamber, the gaseous ethereals floating in their containment suits, the crystalline resonants whose bodies chimed softly as they moved the plant-like sylvans, with their root systems carefully maintained in mobile soil containers, and several others. Each species had evolved under vastly different conditions, creating a tapestry of life that never failed to amaze Mara. Distinguished colleagues, Captain Kor began his voice, carrying the authority of command. Today, we formally welcome humanity into our Alliance. Captain Voss represents not only her species, but also the hope that our combined strengths will ensure lasting peace in the galaxy." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber, translated into various forms of communication by the universal translators, each being war. Mara stepped forward, feeling the weight of history in this moment. "Thank you, Captain Kor, and thank you all for this warm welcome," she began. "Humanity is honored to join the Alliance, and we look forward to contributing our unique perspectives and capabilities to our shared future." It was at that precise moment that fate decided to intervene in the most unexpected way possible. The environmental testing system designed to continuously monitor and adjust atmospheric conditions throughout the ship had been programmed to conduct routine calibration checks during non-critical periods. Unfortunately, the system's scheduling algorithm had not been updated to account for the diplomatic reception taking place in the chamber. As Mara finished her opening remarks, a fine mist of purified H2O began spraying from overhead nozzles, part of the humidity control calibration sequence. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. Dr. Vorn's scanning appendages began flashing urgent red warnings. "Contamination alert, chemical weapon deployment detected. All personnel initiate emergency protocols immediately." Captain Kor's command training kicked in instantly. "Emergency containment seal deck 3 medical teams to diplomatic chamber immediately." The chamber erupted into chaos as Alliance personnel activated emergency breathing apparatus and containment fields. Alarm klaxons wailed throughout the ship as the computer systems registered what they interpreted as a chemical attack. Within seconds, the diplomatic chamber was sealed off from the rest of the vessel. Emergency lighting bathed everything in an ominous red glow, and Mara found herself standing in the center of what her new allies considered a biohazard disaster zone. "Wait!" Mara called out, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. "There's no danger, it's just water." But her words fell on deaf ears, literally in some cases, as several species had activated hearing protection to guard against what they assumed were toxic vapors. The Quan in particular seemed absolutely terrified. Dr. Vorn had retreated to the far side of the chamber and was frantically running scans on the air itself. "By pure dihydrogen monoxide," he announced, his voice carrying a note of horror that Mara had never heard from the usually calm scientist. "Concentration levels approaching saturation. How is the human still standing?" Mara looked around at the assembled aliens, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from fascination to outright terror. The mist had settled, leaving droplets of water on her uniform and in her hair, but she remained completely unharmed. In fact, she was more concerned about the diplomatic incident this was causing than any physical effects of the water exposure. "Please, everyone calm down," she said, trying to project confidence and reassurance. "I understand this may look alarming, but water poses no threat to humans. In fact, we require it for survival." This statement caused an even greater uproar. The Ethereal's containment suits began cycling through various filtration modes, while the resonance chiming reached a frequency that the universal translators struggled to interpret, finally settling on something approximating impossibility vocalizations. Captain Kor stepped forward, his natural leadership asserting itself even in this unprecedented situation. "Captain Voss, I must insist that you submit to immediate medical evaluation. Our protocols require containment of all personnel exposed to chemical hazards until they can be properly decontaminated." Sir, with respect, I don't need decontamination," Mara replied, though she could see that arguing the point would likely be futile, given the current state of panic. "But I'll submit to any medical examination you deem necessary to prove that I'm unharmed." Dr. Vorn approached cautiously, his scanning equipment held out before him like a shield. "The readings are unprecedented," he muttered more to himself than to the assembled group. "Her vital signs remain stable despite direct exposure to pure H2O. This defies all known biological principles." The next several hours passed in a blur of medical examinations, chemical analyses, and increasingly frantic consultations between Alliance scientists. Mara found herself confined to an isolation chamber on Deck 7, subjected to every conceivable scan and test that Alliance medicine could devise. The irony was not lost on her that her species' first formal diplomatic reception had ended with her being quarantined as a potential biological hazard. Through the transparent walls of her isolation chamber, Mara could see Alliance personnel in full hazmat suits coming and going carrying samples and data tablets. Their body language suggested intense debate and considerable confusion. She had tried multiple times to explain that humans not only tolerated water exposure, but actively required it for survival. But such claims were apparently so far outside Alliance understanding of biology that they were being treated as either delusions or some form of human psychological defense mechanism. Dr. Vorn appeared at the chamber's communication panel, his multiple eyes, blinking in the pattern that Mara had learned, indicated deep concentration. "Captain Voss, I must apologize for the circumstances, but the results of our initial scans have raised some extraordinary questions." "I'm listening, Doctor," Mara replied, settling into the chamber's single chair, which had been specially modified for human physiology. "Our analysis indicates that your body is composed of approximately 60% dihydrogen monoxide." Dr. Vorn continued his voice, carrying a note of professional bewilderment. "This should be impossible. H2O is a universal solvent with extreme chemical reactivity. Most Alliance species can tolerate minimal exposure to water vapor in heavily diluted atmospheric mixtures, but direct contact or significant concentration levels are lethal within minutes." Mara nodded thoughtfully. "Doctor, I appreciate your concern, but what you're describing is simply how human biology works. We evolved on a planet that's roughly 70% water. Our bodies depend on it for virtually every biological process. We drink it, we swim in it, we use it for cleaning and recreation." The Quan scientist's appendages twitched in what Mara recognized as intense cognitive processing. "You drink it voluntarily." "Every day," Mara confirmed. "In fact, I'm starting to feel a bit dehydrated. In normal circumstances, I would consume several glasses of water daily." Dr. Vorn stepped back from the communication panel, and Mara could see him engaging in rapid discussions with other medical personnel. The animated gestures and rapid information exchange suggested that her casual admission to drinking water had created even more confusion among the Alliance medical team. Captain Kor appeared at the panel a short time later, his expression carrying the weight of command decisions. "Captain Voss, I find myself in an unprecedented situation. Alliance protocols require that I treat any biological contamination as a potential threat to ship security. However, you appear to be unharmed by exposure to what our science considers a dangerous chemical agent." Sir, I understand your position," Mara replied diplomatically. "Perhaps this presents an opportunity for our species to learn more about each other. Human biology is clearly different from what the Alliance has encountered before, but different doesn't necessarily mean dangerous." Kor's reptilian features showed what might have been consideration. "Dr. Vorn has requested permission to conduct extended observation and testing. He believes that understanding human physiology could provide valuable insights for Alliance xenobiology. Are you willing to participate in such studies?" Mara weighed her options carefully. The diplomatic mission was clearly off to a rocky start, but perhaps demonstrating human cooperation and transparency could salvage the situation. "I'm willing to participate, Captain, provided that the studies are conducted safely, and that I'm kept informed of all procedures." Over the next several days, Mara found herself at the center of the most intensive xenobiological study in Alliance history. Dr. Vorn and his team conducted every conceivable test from detailed cellular analysis to comprehensive metabolic monitoring. Each revelation about human biology seemed to challenge fundamental assumptions about life in the universe. The breakthrough came when Dr. Vorn requested a demonstration of human water consumption. Despite considerable concern from the medical team, Mara was provided with a specially prepared sample of pure H2O in a containment vessel designed for hazardous materials handling. The subject is approaching the containment vessel. Dr. Vorn narrated for the official record, his voice betraying none of the fascination Mara could see in his multiple eyes. She appears to be opening the vessel directly. Alliance personnel throughout the observation chamber held their breath, or the equivalent for their respective species, as Mara calmly lifted the container and brought it to her lips. The act of drinking water, something she had done countless times throughout her life, without a second thought, had become a momentous scientific observation. H2O consumption initiated. Dr. Vorn continued his scanning equipment, registering every detail of the process. No immediate adverse reactions detected. Vital signs remain stable. This is remarkable. Mara set down the container and smiled at the assembled scientists. That was refreshing, actually. I was getting quite thirsty. The implications of this simple demonstration rippled through Alliance scientific understanding, like waves in a pond. If humans could not only survive contact with pure H2O, but actually required it for biological function, then everything the Alliance thought they knew about life in the universe needed to be reconsidered. News of the water-drinking humans spread throughout the Alliance fleet with incredible speed. Within hours, scientists from every member species were requesting access to observational data, and diplomatic channels were buzzing with discussions about the implications of humanity's unique biology. Some Alliance members expressed concern about the potential dangers of beings who could survive in environments that would be lethal to most other species. Others saw opportunities for cooperation and mutual benefit. Captain Kor found himself in the unusual position of commanding a vessel that had accidentally become the center of galactic scientific attention. His decision to maintain Mara's isolation, initially driven by safety protocols, had evolved into protection for both her and the ongoing research. The scientific value of these observations was too important to risk contamination or interference. Captain Voss, Kor announced during one of their daily communication sessions, "I want you to know that your cooperation during this study has been exemplary. However, I must also inform you that Alliance Command has requested a comprehensive evaluation of human biology before approving full integration into joint operations." Mara had expected this development, though she felt a pang of disappointment. "I understand, sir. Will this delay humanity's full membership in the Alliance?" "Not necessarily," Kor replied carefully. "But it will require additional protocols and safety measures. We need to better understand how to accommodate human needs while ensuring the safety of other Alliance species." The cultural exchange sessions that followed were perhaps the most important part of Mara's extended stay aboard the Aegis Nova. Once the initial shock of her water consumption had worn off, various Alliance species began expressing curiosity about other aspects of human culture and biology. Mara found herself serving as an informal ambassador, explaining everything from human dietary requirements to recreational activities. The revelation that humans used water for cleaning purposes caused particularly intense interest among the Sylvans, whose plant-like biology actually shared some similarities with human water dependence. The idea that humans could immerse themselves completely in water for pleasure, as in swimming, was met with fascination and horror in equal measure by different species. "You enter large bodies of H2O voluntarily?" asked Ensign Lickle during one of their cultural exchange sessions. The translucent's crystalline structure actually contained traces of water molecules in its lattice, making them one of the few Alliance species with any natural tolerance for water exposure. "Swimming is one of humanity's oldest recreational activities," Mara explained. "Some humans can hold their breath underwater for several minutes. We've developed various technologies to extend that capability, and water sports are popular throughout human space." These conversations gradually began to shift the Alliance perception of humanity from dangerous anomaly to fascinating ally. The fear that had initially driven Mara's isolation was slowly being replaced by scientific curiosity and diplomatic opportunity. The turning point came during the third week of Mara's extended stay aboard the Aegis Nova. Alliance Command had finally approved limited integration protocols, allowing Mara to participate in some ship operations while maintaining specific safety measures. She had been assigned to assist with routine diplomatic communications when the ship's long-range sensors detected an unexpected contact. "Captain, to the bridge," came the announcement over the ship's communication system. "All senior staff report immediately." Mara had not yet been cleared for bridge duty, but Captain Kor had included her in senior staff briefings as part of the integration process. She made her way to the bridge, still accompanied by the environmental monitoring equipment that tracked her exposure to various atmospheric conditions. "Report," Captain Kor commanded, as he took his position at the center of the bridge. "Long-range sensors have detected a vessel on an intercept course," reported the tactical officer, a member of the militaristic Vexar species, whose natural aggressiveness had been channeled into Alliance defense forces. "Configuration suggests Vexar pirate elements, possibly the Crimson Claw faction." Mara felt a chill run down her spine. The Vexar pirates were notorious throughout the galaxy for their brutality and their use of psychological warfare. They had been among the primary antagonists during the Third Galactic War, and remnant factions continued to operate outside Alliance space. "Time to intercept," Kor asked. "Approximately 2 hours at current speed and heading," the tactical officer replied. "They appear to be using some form of stealth technology. We didn't detect them until they were already within scanning range." Captain Kor's expression grew grave. "Signal Alliance Command. Request immediate reinforcements and prepare for possible combat engagement." The next hour passed in tense preparation. The Aegis Nova was a diplomatic vessel armed, but not designed for prolonged combat against dedicated pirate ships. The crew worked efficiently to prepare defensive systems and evacuation protocols, but everyone understood that their situation was precarious. The attack came without warning. Vexar pirates were known for their preference for psychological warfare, and the Crimson Claw faction specialized in boarding actions designed to capture rather than destroy their targets. Advanced jamming systems disabled the Aegis Nova's long-range communications, cutting them off from Alliance reinforcements. Precision strikes damaged the engines, leaving the ship dead in space. Within minutes, boarding pods were attaching to the hull. "All hands prepare for boarding action," Captain Kor announced. "Implement Security Protocol 7, protect Alliance personnel, and classified materials at all costs." Mara found herself in an impossible situation. As humanity's first liaison officer, she had been strictly instructed to avoid any actions that might be construed as aggressive or militaristic. However, Alliance protocols also required all personnel to defend the ship and crew. The conflict between her diplomatic mission and her military training created a moment of paralyzing indecision. The decision was made for her when a group of Vexar pirates broke through the security barriers on deck, 3 heading directly for the diplomatic chamber, where several Alliance species representatives had taken shelter. The pirates moved with the casual brutality of beings accustomed to violence, and their body language suggested they were more interested in taking prisoners than in killing. Mara realized with sudden clarity that her unique biology might provide an unexpected advantage. The Alliance's fear of water had been based on legitimate biological concerns for their species, but that same fear could be weaponized against attackers who shared those biological limitations. Moving quickly, Mara activated the ship's emergency water suppression system, designed to flood specific areas with H2O in case of certain types of fires. She directed the system to target the corridors leading to the diplomatic chamber, creating a barrier of water vapor and standing liquid that the Vexar pirates would find difficult to cross. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The pirates, expecting resistance in the form of energy weapons or physical barriers, suddenly found themselves facing an environment that their biology couldn't tolerate. The lead pirate, a particularly scarred Vexar warrior, stopped abruptly as water vapor began filling the corridor. "Chemical weapons," he snarled into his communication device. "The Alliance is using prohibited substances." Mara stepped into view at the far end of the corridor, standing calmly in the water-saturated environment that the pirates found terrifying. "This isn't a chemical weapon," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the ship's communication system. "This is just water, pure H2O. The psychological effect was devastating. Vexar pirates were accustomed to intimidating their victims through superior firepower and ruthless tactics, but they had never encountered an opponent who could casually exist in an environment that would kill them in minutes. Mara's apparent immunity to what they perceived as a deadly chemical weapon suggested capabilities far beyond anything they had prepared for. "I suggest you withdraw immediately." Mara continued, taking a deliberate step forward into an area where water was actively pooling on the deck. "Human biology allows us to function in environments that would be lethal to your species. If you continue this attack, you'll be facing an opponent whose capabilities you don't understand." The standoff continued for several tense minutes as the pirates consulted among themselves. Mara could hear fragments of their communication, and it was clear that her demonstration had created considerable confusion and concern. The psychological warfare that they typically used against their victims was being turned against them. Captain Kor's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All Alliance personnel maintain defensive positions. Unknown human capabilities are currently being deployed against boarding parties." Mara almost smiled at the diplomatic phrasing. Kor was carefully avoiding any statements that might be interpreted as official Alliance endorsement of human military capabilities, while still acknowledging that something effective was happening. The pirates' withdrawal was as sudden as their attack had been. Faced with an opponent whose abilities they couldn't assess, and an environment they couldn't survive in, the Crimson Claw faction chose to cut their losses and retreat. Their boarding pods detached from the Aegis Nova's hull, and their ship accelerated away into space. The immediate crisis was over, but the implications of what had happened were only beginning to become clear. Mara had successfully defended the ship and crew, using nothing more than water and the psychological impact of her species' unique biology. No shots had been fired, no Alliance personnel had been harmed, and the attackers had been driven off through pure intimidation. Captain Kor appeared in the corridor shortly after the all-clear was sounded, accompanied by Dr. Vorn and several other senior staff members. They all stopped at the edge of the water-soaked area, maintaining the safe distance that their biology required. "Captain Voss," Kor said formally, "I believe we need to have a serious discussion about human capabilities and their potential applications in Alliance operations." The aftermath of the pirate attack transformed Mara's status aboard the Aegis Nova from diplomatic curiosity to valuable crew member. The official reports carefully documented the incident as a successful defensive action using novel environmental modification techniques. But everyone involved understood that they had witnessed something unprecedented. Dr. Vorn requested permission to conduct additional studies, this time focused on the practical applications of human water tolerance, rather than just the biological mechanisms involved. "The implications for Alliance operations are significant," he explained to Captain Kor during a senior staff meeting. "Humans could potentially operate in environments that we consider uninhabitable, providing unique capabilities for exploration, rescue operations, and defensive applications." Captain Kor found himself in the position of having to recommend changes to Alliance protocols based on the discoveries about human biology. "I'm recommending that Captain Voss be granted full operational status," he announced during a communication with Alliance Command. "Her unique capabilities have proven valuable for ship defense, and I believe she represents the potential for significant human contributions to Alliance operations." The formal ceremony recognizing Mara's contribution to ship defense took place in the same diplomatic chamber where her water exposure had initially caused such alarm. This time, however, the atmosphere was celebratory rather than panicked. Representatives from all Alliance species had gathered to acknowledge humanity's unique place in the galactic community. Captain Voss, Captain Kor, announced formally, by authority of Alliance Command, and in recognition of your exemplary service during the defense of this vessel, you are hereby appointed as Special Environmental Hazards Consultant to the Alliance Fleet. This position acknowledges both your diplomatic role and your unique operational capabilities. The title was diplomatically phrased to avoid any suggestion that humans were being recruited specifically as weapons, but everyone understood the practical implications. Mara had become the first human to demonstrate that their species' biology could provide tactical advantages in certain situations. The return to Starbase Orion marked the beginning of a new chapter in human-alliance relations. Word of the water incident and subsequent pirate encounter had spread throughout Alliance space, generating intense interest in human capabilities and potential applications. Diplomatic channels buzzed with requests for human consultation on various projects and operations. Mara found herself at the center of a cultural phenomenon. The Alliance species that had initially feared human contact with water now viewed humanity as possessing almost magical abilities. While this was an overreaction in the opposite direction from their initial panic, it represented progress toward genuine understanding and cooperation. The scientific exchange programs that emerged from these events proved to be more valuable than anyone had initially anticipated. Human researchers gained access to Alliance technology and knowledge that advanced their understanding of the universe by centuries. Alliance scientists discovered new possibilities for exploration and operation in environments they had previously considered completely hostile. Dr. Vorn published a comprehensive study on human biology that became required reading throughout Alliance space. His conclusion, that humanity represents a unique, evolutionary adaptation to high water environments, providing capabilities that complement existing Alliance strengths, helped establish the scientific foundation for human integration into broader Alliance operations. The strategic implications became clear during the first joint Alliance human exploration mission, 6 months later. A survey team investigating a water-rich planet had been stranded when their equipment failed in the humid atmosphere. Traditional Alliance rescue operations would have required massive environmental modification to make the surface habitable for rescue teams. Instead, a human rescue team was able to operate directly in the planetary environment, locating and evacuating the stranded personnel in a fraction of the time that conventional methods would have required. These successes led to the establishment of specialized human units within Alliance operations, focusing on environments and situations where human water tolerance provided unique advantages. Rather than being seen as a liability or curiosity, humanity's biological differences had become a strategic asset. Captain Kor, reflecting on the events that had transformed his ship from a routine diplomatic vessel into the center of galactic scientific attention, often noted that the most significant discoveries often came from the most unexpected sources. The Alliance believed we understood the fundamental principles of life in the universe, he would tell audiences at the military academy. A simple malfunction of our environmental systems taught us that there was still much to learn. Mara's role evolved beyond her original diplomatic mission to become something entirely new, a bridge between human and Alliance understanding that opened possibilities neither side had previously imagined. Her daily consumption of water, once viewed as impossibly dangerous behavior, became a symbol of humanity's unique contribution to the galactic community. The formal recognition ceremony at Alliance headquarters on Starbase Orion drew representatives from throughout known space. For the first time in galactic history, a member species was being honored specifically for their biological differences, rather than despite them. The ceremony featured demonstrations of human-water interaction that amazed and inspired audiences who had once found such behavior terrifying. The Alliance has always been strengthened by diversity, announced the Alliance Premier during the ceremony. Today, we recognize that diversity extends beyond culture and technology to the fundamental biology of life itself. Humanity's unique capabilities remind us that our differences are not obstacles to overcome, but strengths to celebrate and utilize. Mara stood before the assembly, thinking about the journey that had brought her from that first panicked exposure to water mist to this moment of recognition and celebration. The fear and misunderstanding that had initially greeted humanity's biological differences had been transformed into appreciation and strategic partnership. The Alliance has taught humanity that we are not alone in the universe, she said in her acceptance speech. But perhaps more importantly, we have learned that being different doesn't mean being incompatible. Our unique biology allows us to contribute to Alliance operations in ways that complement rather than compete with the capabilities of other member species. The establishment of the Human Environmental Operations Division marked the formal recognition of humanity's specialized role within Alliance structure. This division would coordinate human participation in operations requiring water tolerance, from planetary exploration to emergency rescue missions. The division's motto, adopted from an ancient human phrase, was Semper Adaptabilis, always adaptable. Years later, as Mara advanced through Alliance ranks to become the first human admiral, she would often reflect on that initial water exposure incident that had changed everything. The fear and confusion of that first day had given way to understanding, cooperation, and mutual respect. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not by conforming to Alliance expectations, but by demonstrating that their differences could be strengths. The story of humanity's integration into the Alliance became a template for incorporating other newly discovered species. The lesson learned from the water crisis was that biological and cultural differences should be explored and understood rather than feared or suppressed. This approach led to successful integration of several other species, whose unique characteristics might otherwise have been seen as problems rather than opportunities. The Aegis Nova itself became a symbol of successful integration, serving as the flagship for joint operations that utilized the unique capabilities of multiple Alliance species. The diplomatic chamber, where Mara had first been exposed to water, was preserved as a historical site with a plaque commemorating the moment when humanity's differences were first recognized as strengths. Dr. Vorn continued his research into comparative xenobiology, with human physiology serving as a model for understanding adaptation and survival in diverse environments. His work contributed to breakthrough discoveries in medicine, environmental science, and space exploration that benefited all Alliance species. Captain Kor, eventually promoted to Admiral, became one of the strongest advocates for human inclusion in Alliance operations. His command philosophy emphasized the importance of understanding and utilizing the unique capabilities of all crew members, regardless of their biological or cultural background. The transformation of humanity from feared anomaly to valued partner demonstrated the potential for cooperation and understanding that lay at the heart of the Alliance's mission. What had begun as a simple environmental malfunction had revealed possibilities that none of the participants could have imagined. Mara's legacy extended far beyond her individual achievements to represent a fundamental shift in how the Alliance approached diversity and difference. The principle that biological variation could be a source of strength rather than division became central to Alliance philosophy and policy. The story of the human who could drink water became legend throughout Alliance space, inspiring countless other examples of cooperation and mutual benefit. Children of all Alliance species learned about the importance of understanding and appreciating differences, using humanity's integration as an example of how fear could be transformed into friendship. As the Alliance expanded to include even more diverse species, the lessons learned from humanity's integration proved invaluable. Each new member brought unique capabilities and perspectives that enriched the community as a whole, building on the foundation established by that first exposure to water aboard the Aegis Nova. The universe was vast and full of wonders that no single species could fully comprehend alone. But together, Celebrating their differences while working toward common goals, the Alliance species had found a way to thrive among the stars. And it all began with a human who wasn't afraid to drink water.